Hey guys, welcome back. Comic Book University, Professor Bill here. Guys, Happy New Year. It's 2017. Couldn't be done fast enough with 2016. I'm almost afraid to look at the news at what just happened not too long ago. All right, guys. Right now, we just had a very significant incident that happened in the comic books, all right? I think you know what I'm talking about. Justice League versus Suicide Squad, issue number 2. Oh my God, issue 3 hasn't come out yet. All right, at the time of this video right here. Now, this is one of the most insane comics. All right, because we showed that the Justice League, as I predicted, completely trounced the Suicide Squad. They didn't stand a chance. You know, Aquaman putting the beating on Killer Croc, Wonder Woman. I guess because they're both girls going after Harley Quinn. I don't know why Wonder Woman didn't go after the Enchantress. I mean, wouldn't that have made more sense? She fights Cersei, so why not go after her? Instead, you take your biggest strong guy. How about have him go against what's his name? Pyro, not Pyro. Sorry, that's Marvel. El Diablo. Why not something like that? That just didn't make any sense to me. Instead, he goes after Enchantress, or she goes after him, and then she realizes that he's vulnerable to magic. Now, let's just really quick talk about his weaknesses in general. All right, because the point there is Superman got beat by Enchantress, and then the rest of the Justice League were very easily disposed of because Amanda Waller, she they're putting her in the league with Batman, and I think that's good. I think that's good. I know a lot of Batman fans. No, nobody's gonna like Batman. Stop, calm down, breathe. Give Batman an enemy, an adversary that's actually worthwhile, please, because he needs it. So Amanda Waller said, really quickly jumped out and says, Live Wire, nope, sorry, Killer Frost, they both look the same. Killer Frost, jump on Superman really quick, absorb his life energy. He gets his energy from the sun, do it. So she does. Steals his life force. He's a cryptic little looking thing now, and then she just boom with her ice powers, and it's enough to incapacitate all of the other members of the Justice League. So they all get captured, and now they're apparently forced to join the Suicide Squad. We'll see what happens in issue 3. Riveting, edge of your seat, excellent writing. I went into this with very low expectations. Maybe that's why this surpassed everything I possibly hoped that this could be. This was such great reading. Oh my God, what a great comic. What an insane comic. But there are a lot of people who are angry. A whole lot of people, they're a little upset, couple haters. They're not too happy with the idea that Superman got so apparently easily trounced. Now, they didn't really show that battle. They just showed that, she hit Superman or something to that effect, and he went, oh, I was like, oh, he seems to be vulnerable to magic, weakness to, she actually says specifically, a weakness to magic. Now, when you talk about Superman's 3 weaknesses, you got kryptonite, and we're typically talking about green kryptonite, but apparently any kind of kryptonite, red, green, pink, yes, they all exist. There's many more. But green kryptonite, basically, the planet Krypton exploded right behind Superman, and the certain parts of it were fused together, and that made it radioactive specifically to Superman. Now, some comics have shown that it's actually radioactive to humans also. Some have shown that it's not. Lex Luthor at one point, the Batman vs Superman, not Batman vs Superman. No, this was actually good. The Batman and Superman comics. He was injecting himself with kryptonite, and he would get stronger and more powerful and all that stuff. But he was also dying from radiation poisoning. And other times, humans just handling it willy nilly, juggling like circus clowns. Not really, but no effects that we heard about. I'm going to get back to that. Red Sun. All right, Red Sun. Superman's all about electromagnetic radiation, right? The Red Sun radiation is what has always fallen on the Daxamites, on the Kryptonites, and thus they never developed any powers. But when exposed to a yellow sun, all of a sudden, now all of a sudden we have superpowers. The only one that's never really fully explained is flight. Nobody can really agree on it. One writer actually at one point says, has Lex Luthor comment that, the planet Krypton must have been so massive that they developed certain anti-gravimetric organs. Yeah, so that they could fly, other places. Yeah, yeah, certain organs that are anti-gravity. That works. Not, no, it doesn't. So, smartest man on earth, huh? So, there have been certain different theories on that. I'm going to get back to that also. Literally, pin in both. And then there's the idea of magic. And now this has gone back way in the past. I actually just read this recently, issue number 49 of the original Justice League of America series. Superman had to face an ogre, and he couldn't it was a magical ogre. He could not directly hurt the ogre with his fists and any of that stuff because the creature's magic and he's science. Very, very, very weak science by by writers who were not scientists, but he's supposedly comic book science, right? So he couldn't affect this ogre, but he was able to pick up a stick and beat the snot out of the ogre. I guess the ogre was wearing the original Alan Scott Green Lantern ring. Anyway, the point is, this wooden stick was able to, with Superman's strength, the stick didn't break. Anyway, so, that's not all the comics, though. He can usually directly affect a magic wielder. Look at him versus Black Adam. But magic overrides his invulnerabilities. Now, one of the biggest complaints that I get by people who are just so massively in love with Superman that they just don't get that it's just comics. This is religion to them. They'll say, I'll be like, oh, well, Superman's got 3 weaknesses: kryptonite, red sun, and magic. No! He's not weak against magic. He just doesn't have a vulnerability. He doesn't have an invulnerability to magic like he has to everything else. In the world, that's called a weakness. All right? If I'm wearing a Kevlar vest and therefore a lot of these bullets are bouncing off of me, they hit me and ow, it hurts really bad, but no, I'm good, and I start going. But a bullet made of silver will go right through a Kevlar vest, right? If it's made of this particular material, right? Now that doesn't happen in real life, but in this fantasy world, a silver bullet, all right, will treat Kevlar like it's a werewolf. Then it's weak. It's weak against silver. So please stop kicking and screaming like you're falling down a vortex. You're not. All right, you shouldn't be. He's weak against magic. That's the very definition of a vulnerability. It's the internet. Look it up if you don't have a dictionary. It's not a big deal. It makes him more exciting. Some writers have even made Superman vulnerable to electricity. Depends on who's writing him, because there are some writers, bzz, ha, no big deal. Bzz, oh, electricity, ow. Maybe he's not as vulnerable to electricity as he is to magic. It depends on the writers. And that's where those two pins come from, right? Does kryptonite affect regular human beings? Depends on the writer. The red sun, you know what I'm saying? Like, all these different things. It all depends on the writer. Case in point, would kryptonite, if kryptonite came to Earth right now and we got it and we went to Superman under the yellow sun and said, he would be affected. You get within 10 feet of him, all right, and there's no lead around him, he would be affected by this. But here's a question. If you were to take that same piece of kryptonite and then go to, let's say, Daxam. All right, well, actually, Daxam now has the yellow sun, thanks to Eon. But the point is, Ion, let's say we go to another planet where there are Kryptonian-type metaphysiology people there, and they're under a red sun. They've never had the exposure to the yellow sun, so they don't have yellow sun radiation. They've only got the red sun radiation. By the way, it's the same thing. And we go there with this same piece of kryptonite. Would the kryptonite affect these people? Depends on the writer. Some might say, oh no, it won't affect them because, they don't have... And other people would say, yeah, because it's diffused kryptonite. It depends on the writer. And there have been so many writers All right, and that's the thing. Batman, Captain America, so many different people have had so many different writers. But with Superman, everybody's got their own ideology of what Superman really is. And that's the thing that's actually really important. Just adjusting my light sources here. That's the thing that's really important about Superman. There are so many people with so much love for Superman. Some of them want to make him stronger. Some of them want to make him a little bit weaker. Some of them want to say, forget about how strong he is. Let's look at the actual story of him, and let's look at this and let's look at that. There have been more songs written about Superman than anybody else because he's evoked the imagination of more people than any other superhero ever has. Yes, that includes Wolverine, that includes Batman, that includes Wonder Woman for women. Superman has evoked more imagination in people than anybody else, and that's just it's a fact. It's out there. It's a provable fact. That's why it's a fact. It's provable. That's just what it is. So of course you're gonna have more people fighting to write for Superman, and when they go in there, they want to put their touch on it. And DC Comics is not so concerned with continuity like Marvel is. Marvel's continuity has massive breach flaws in it, but they at least try to maintain continuity. Superman, not just Superman, DC Comics, no, not so much. Not so much, and there are so many examples thereof. Is it Elseworlds? Is it not Elseworlds? Depends on what the fans like. The Killing Joke, as I've said many times, was supposed to be Elseworlds. That's the equivalent of a what if comic, right? Elseworlds comic, what if comic. That's DC and Marvel, respectively's, what if world. It didn't happen. It happened in another multiverse that doesn't affect this universe. So, it's just a what if, Elseworlds, But people loved the Killing Joke so much, people loved Kingdom Come so much, and rightfully so on both accounts, that DC said, oh, yeah, that's real continuity. Just, well, how does it fit in? Shut up. That's how. Because more about just, they're more about just telling really good stories. Heck, you look at mythology, man. You look at Greek mythology, there are so many things out there that conflict with each other, right? There are a lot of contradictions in there. And it still works. It still works. Well, if this happened, then how did that happen? Well, it doesn't matter. They both happened. Well, how? Because they did. Shut up. That's why. Shut up science. It's a great it's great for the comic books. So let's talk about Superman's weakness to magic. Yes, weakness to magic. Yeah, he's weak to magic in the sense that he can directly affect magic. If someone were to cast a spell against Superman, like let's say a fireball spell. Let's say a concussion spell. Okay, let's do this a little bit scientifically. A concussive kinetic blast against Superman. Boom, he goes down, right? But if they were to, let's say, use magic to make a mountain explode or smash into Superman, that would be the mountain hitting him, and his invulnerability would function against the mountain. But a direct blast for magic, there's the rub. There's the rub. So magic will directly affect him, but not indirectly. All right, so that's a really huge point to make on this. But the idea of his magic vulnerability to begin with, so many different writers. One writer at one point pointed out that, Superman is based solidly in science, weakly in science, solidly in science, and thus he doesn't believe in magic. That's why it works on him. The reason why magic works in the comic books and in actual religions, there are religions that still believe in magic, is because you actually believe in the magic. So that would be the exact opposite thing. Other writers, and I like this person, and again, if I were to write Superman, this is how I would make it. That Superman is simply based on science, electromagnetic spectrum, all that good stuff, but magic works on a spectrum that is counterintuitive to science. Now, in the DC universe especially, that works very well. That works great with the idea that that science doesn't work the same way, and thus this can come in and this can actually interfere with the science. That's kind of how it works in Marvel also, to a degree. Not with any one specific character, with all characters. Doctor Strange is very effective against the Incredible Hulk because while all these other things will bounce off of him, magic will go right through. And that works with pretty much everything. It's never actually been done before, but the idea that Captain America can have everything reflect off of his shield, why would that work against magic exactly? So, if Doctor Strange or some other magic using being, hero, villain, were to use magic directly against the shield in the sense of, okay, here's a telekinetic bolt, or here is a fireball, a magical fireball, there's still the fire element and all that stuff, and it would reflect off of the shield. It was half absorb, half reflect. Depends on the angle that he worked the shield. I'm going to write down in here, talk about Captain America's shield. Cap shield, because one of these days I'm going to have a podcast about that, because clearly a lot of people don't get Cap shield at all, right? So, and some very close friends of mine who say, well, that doesn't make sense. Actually, it doesn't make sense to you. But anyway, so the point is, just other things I could talk about in the podcasts. So the idea that magic works on a different frequency, just a slightly altered frequency than your standard science, makes sense. All right, and the mystical in a world where magic doesn't exist, it makes sense. It actually makes really good sense. So Superman's physiology. Now, would magic work on him more or less if he were still under the red sun and didn't have any yellow sun energy radiation left inside of him? It probably wouldn't work more or less. So what they're saying here is that the yellow sun radiation is bypassed by by magic. You can affect it. That actually works pretty well over in Marvel too, because Doctor Strange is essentially immune to everything physical when he's in his astral form, except when you go inside of a sun or a star for too long, the effects of the radiation and the fission inside of inside of the sun will actually disrupt the molecules of the astral form. It would make sense that there are molecules in there some way, somehow. It is still energy, your astral form, your ethereal form, ectoplasmic form, whatever they're going to call it. They call all three of them and more. That it would be affected by this. But the point is that the magic and science are going to have a problem with each other at a certain point. And it seems to come to a head with Superman. Now, Wonder Woman was magically created in some way, shape, or form. The gods created her. It depends on which origin you're going to look at. Was she made of clay? Was she made by a love affair tryst with Zeus and Hippolyta? It depends on which version of her origin story you're going to follow, all of them, whatever. The fact is that she was definitely created with magic. So therefore she would be immune to magic, just like all of her other immunities. Maybe she would even have an extra immunity to magic, which is why I don't see why she didn't go after Enchantress instead of leaving Superman. He could have taken on all of the members of the Suicide Squad, and everybody else in the Justice League could have gone after the Enchantress just to prevent this from happening. And Batman was on the team. Master strategist. And it's not a slight on Batman, it's a slight on the writer in that particular point. Or maybe it's just one of those things where, whatever, man, whatever. I mean, when you look at it, somehow Amanda Waller was able to make the Suicide Squad, and Batman didn't know. And there have been several points in the comics where DC knew, where Batman knew, he found out about the Suicide Squad. But then, of course, every 5 years there's a crisis of some sort, and then we go back. And even Flashpoint was a crisis. They just because they don't call it a crisis, it was a crisis, okay? Rebirth, it was a crisis, okay? They rebirthed from a crisis. So, yeah, it was a reboot, all right? DC doesn't say reboot, they say crisis. So even if they stop saying crisis, it's a crisis. So the point is that all of these crazy things are happening, and Batman should have been on top of it. He's world's greatest mind, you know what I'm saying, for that point. He's the world's greatest detective, right? And the only person smarter than him apparently is Lex Luthor, so he should have known somehow that Amanda Waller was doing the Suicide Squad. He should have known that she broke into, or that she was capable of breaking into, his Batcave. He should have known that, hey, Superman is vulnerable to, it's just one of those it's a little aside that it's a lack of continuity in writing. It's a lack of the editorial process that causes these things to happen. Because let's be realistic here. Batman is supposed to be the master strategist. If Batman is on your team, right, then let me just put it this way. Marvel wouldn't have allowed this to happen with Captain America. Right? Marvel would have looked at this and said, whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on. You got you got like the Hulk over here, who, let's say he's vulnerable to people wearing fuzzy pink bunny slippers, and fuzzy pink bunny slipper man is over here, and oh no, he's going after the Hulk. Well, clearly we got to get Thor to go after fuzzy pink bunny man's slippers man, and let Hulk deal with somebody else instead. Cap would have been on it because Marvel would have been on it. The editors there would have been on it. Axel Alonso never would have let something like that happen. But DC likes to play musical chairs with his people so often, and juggle and just whatever, and they don't look, and they just look at it as, you know what? It's important for the story that we allow the Justice League to be captured, so we'll allow this to happen. What about Batman being on the team? Batman was distracted by Deadshot. Where literally Batman is just making fun of Deadshot the entire time and saying, you hid behind your daughter and you shot at somebody. What are you talking about? No, but it doesn't matter. You did it. And you killed someone, therefore you're irredeemable. Really? Batman, who's always bringing people to Arkham to try to be cured, is suggesting that Floyd Lawton is irredeemable? Just facepalm if you didn't notice. That's just unacceptable. That bothered me more than the idea of Superman being beaten up by the Enchantress. Because now you suggest that the Enchantress is more powerful than Black Adam, which I don't believe. But maybe we'll have a versus battle with that one of these days. In the meantime, she was able to beat Superman because she exploited his weakness. And it's not the best writing, but it was very cool. It was a very cool story nonetheless. And if you could just simply allow for a little bit of suspension of disbelief, very interesting. So, just a comment on the idea of Superman's vulnerability to magic. Again, it is a weakness to magic. He's not more susceptible to it than anybody else, no. But since it bypasses his armor, he is therefore weak to it. You know what I'm saying? It's just... it's not like saying allergies with a human being. Oh, you got 10 people, one of them is allergic to pollen, therefore he's weak against... Yes, he is weak against pollen, right? Plant sperm will knock him on his butt. It's the way it is. But weaknesses show in many different ways. A kink in someone's armor is a weakness. If you have a tank and there's a little hole that goes right to the driver's head... and you can get a sniper who, in fact, you know what? On the bottom, it's something in the army we always say. You especially have to be careful when human beings had to guard tanks. Anyway, when a tank is cresting a hill, it's the most vulnerable because you just toss something like a grenade underneath, and then boom, it's going to hold all that concussive energy underneath. It can actually blow up underneath, kill the driver, kill the people inside, all that stuff, hurt people. So now the tank is rendered inoperative because it's got, softer, squishier parts on the bottom. You can't have all that armor underneath. Tanks still need to breathe too. They've got ventilation ports and everything. So, yeah, sorry, they're not completely sealed like that. So when a tank is going over top of a hill, hey, there's a weakness. It's strong all over the place, but it's weak down there. Superman, he's invulnerable to everything unless it's magical. That's a kink in his armor. That's what it is. It's a kink in his armor. Hey, vampires are weak against wooden stakes to the heart. You take a metal stake and put it in his heart? Oh, you bastard. I'm going to kill you with this thing. Well, a wooden stake to the heart will kill a human being just as easily as it will a vampire. Unless you're playing Vampire the Masquerade and all that stuff, then it just puts them in torpor. But that's beside the point. Oh, I miss playing Vampire the Masquerade. But, so a vampire is weak. Again, hey, a vampire can be killed by cutting off his head. So can any living being. You cut off his head. This isn't just a Highlander, man. Right? You cut off a Highlander's arm. I'm talking about Highlander, the Reckoning and all that stuff. Christopher Lambert, for crying out loud. All that good stuff. There can be only one. You cut off his head, he dies. And you get the quickening in there. You cut him off at the waist, he'll pull himself back together. I guess. Or just wobble around forever. There can be only one. And still fighting with his sword, from the waist up. But the point is that if you can be hurt by something, it's a weakness. If you're usually invulnerable to everything else, right? If I cut off your arm and you're, if I cut you off at the waist and you're still alive, because you're a vampire or a Highlander, hey man, but if I cut off your neck, even though anybody will die by cutting off your neck, vampire, Highlander, or not, then guess what? That's a weakness. Even though everybody can be killed that way. I'm not more susceptible to a wooden stake in the heart or more susceptible to decapitation. I'm just as susceptible as vampires and immortals. So, bang. Superman is just as susceptible to magic as anybody else is. That's called a weakness. Don't be so upset over the wordology, the terminology that's being used here, the morphology of the word. It's a weakness. That's all it is. And it's basically just a tool for writers to make things a little more interesting. That's it. Is Superman weak against electricity? Depends on who's writing him. How weak is Superman against magic? Depends on who's writing him. Because there's so many people with so many images in their head of how this works. And here's the cool part about being a human being, adult, with emotional intelligence. You recognize that other people have different opinions than you, and you just say, okay. As long as their opinion isn't to kill you or hurt you, then who cares? Who cares? He votes this way, he votes that way. Who cares? We got different opinions of each other. Oh, I'm a very religious person, and this person over here is using foul language. Okay. In front of my child. Okay. Your child's not going to die. Your child is going to hear those words when you're not around. He's going to hear your words when they are around. It doesn't mean that this person should be cursing. No, this person is wrong. This person is wrong. But people can be wrong. People can have different opinions than you. And just, where I come from back in the day, if a guy curses in front of a woman or in front of a kid, but especially a woman, he gets beaten up. But that's a long time ago. That's a big thing amongst Italians. Hey, you don't curse in front of a woman like that. Now these same people probably go home and curse in front of their kids. It is what it is. Saying they go home and curse in front of their wife, whatever. But on the streets, you don't do that in front of other women. That's just it's the way it is. You know what I'm saying? But we don't go around beating people up. This really got out of control. This really got out of control. It's late. It's late. Happy New Year. But the idea is that people will have different opinions in how Superman is supposed to be written. And that's okay. That's okay. Anyway, guys, I'm going to cut this off a little bit short. My rant got a little bit out of control there. Whatever, it is what it is. So, regardless, it's just writing. It's just writing. It depends on who's writing. And remember, in DC, the story is more important than the continuity. In Marvel, certain stories simply can't be told the way that a writer would want them to be told, because that's why in the MCU, there's so many directors who'll just say, oh, that's it, I'm out of here because of creative differences. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's kind of what happens, because Marvel has a story to tell, and the whole story is more important than your individual story. And that's kind of crucial. So when DC says, oh, that's not going to happen, DC's got how many movies out now? I'm talking for the current DC universe. 3. As of the time of this writing, of this podcast. 3. That's Suicide Squad, BVS, and Man of Steel. That's it. They've only got those 3 out. And they've already had how many directors to leave The Flash? Right? Because at the end of the day, the overall overarching story is important. But DC does, outside of their DC cinematic universe, they do put more emphasis on the story itself, and we'll worry about continuity later, if at all. They're more interested in telling the story itself. So, Superman got beaten up by the Enchantress. This time, maybe not next time. It doesn't mean it's a universal. She will always beat him. Doesn't mean that. Maybe he didn't want to hit a girl. We didn't actually see the battle. We saw everybody else battling. We saw that she said, "Ooh, he's weak to magic," and then we saw her knock him out much later on at the end of the fight. So, is what it is. It's just writers. Guys, anyway, this is Professor Bell, Comic Book University. Be good to yourselves and each other. That's my Jerry Springer moment. I think that's what he used to say. Maybe he still says it. I don't know. Anyway, guys, Comic Book University, class dismissed.